Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and welcome to Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends. I'm Wayne Tuttle, your host once again. Please hit subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Leave a comment if you want to. Visit our website at www.legendsuperstitionmountains.com. Please. Bark notes should be going up. Trevor was working on them. I don't know if he's added anything to that, but that's supposed to be coming with other things. Join us on our lives on Friday, 4 p.m. Arizona time. That's because Arizona time is always Arizona time. So you don't have to, you can just go 4 o'clock Arizona time. There's nothing, it never changes. So let's move forward in today's story. Today's story is an interesting one. It's one I'd heard of, but there's not a lot of mention, and it's surprising because once you hear it, you're going to feel it has the basis for other stories. It probably predates a lot of them. But additionally, you're going to say, well, there's a lot of information and documentation on this story. How come we don't hear more about it? And it is interesting because of that. And maybe it's because it's maybe actually is a real thing. And reality kind of sucks for people when there's something real and they just can't come to some conclusion on it. It concerns a map. Concerns a man by the name of Dave Arnold. He originally had come out of Missouri, had a ranch in Texas, and he comes wandering in to Haskell County, Texas. And when he does, he starts kind of looking around. He has a sheepskin map. And with this sheepskin map, he's talking about he knows where there's treasure, but he needs kind of a base of operations. There's a couple other people that are kind of interested in thinking there's Spanish treasure in the area. One of them is a Dr. Terrell, who owns Terrell Hardware Store in Haskell, Texas, this town, which is in the county, Haskell, Texas. Another gentleman is a man who became sheriff later, Crawford Allen. And he ends up staying at Allen's place. And Terrell puts up the money, and they get a number of other people. One gentleman is another rancher named Bud Jones gets interested and involved. A gentleman named J. Kelly Johnson. So another man named Bud Olson. So there's like a dozen of them get involved, and one of the people involved comes with Arnold, is a Mexican who's a goat herder that nobody really can speak to, speaks Spanish, but he only really talks to Arnold, and the two of them are the only two people that see Arnold's map for the most part. Arnold shows up with the map and says, we need to, start looking around. We think this is the area. Seems to lie with him where I'm looking. I'm looking for this map and all this stuff. And the Mexican finally decides to tells them up on this hill in this mound area, we need to dig here. And he tells them what they're going to find. They're going to find some sort of wall, and then they're going to find some bodies, the slaves that the Spanish had working for them. And once they go below there, they're going to find what they're looking for right then. So, oddly enough, they're digging down, and after about 6, 7, 8 feet, they find a caliche or clay wall. And they break through it, and they start finding the skeletal remains of at least 12 to 15 people in ash and stuff. The Mexican informs them this is because this is the curse that's put upon the treasure and everything in the area. But this is the key to where we need to dig, and tells them you need to dig through this. So they're not archaeologists. They're looking for treasure. So we don't know how many bodies exactly and anything else. Then they just threw everything aside, kept digging. And they came upon 3 artifacts made out of copper. One was a dagger, one was a key, and the other was a square, which had notches in it. And the Mexicans said, okay, we need these things to interpret, but keep digging. So they continue to dig, thinking, what are we digging? Man, we found the bodies, we found these things, you got a map. Well, then they find a large piece of stone, and on each side of it is what's called the Spider Rock map. They dig this out, and this is what they're going to interpret with the sheepskin to start looking for treasure. The Mexican immediately starts going through, they start deciphering, and then he'll tell them, okay, you know what, this means this, and we need to go this many feet this way. One of the first things they uncover, oddly enough to them, is a large bone of what looks like is some sort of prehistoric animal. It's very odd because it's not what that, but it has inscriptions and stuff on it and like hieroglyphs, and they're just looking at it like, what's this about? So they take that, they start digging that out, and they pull that up, and then he tells them, okay, we got to go so many feet this way. There they find an old Spanish sword, 42 gold buttons, and a couple other artifacts, including, I believe it was a silver crucifix. And they're thinking, man, this is pretty cool. Let's just keep going. So the group continues to dig stuff up. They go a certain distance west of there, and the Mexican tells them they need to dig here, and it's quite a large area, and they start excavating, and what they find is a very round, circular, buried object, and it involves kind of a replica of what's the Spider Rock map, and it has these red and black and blue clay balls set at different intervals. And they take that and start measuring that out. Now, at this point, they're all just kind of like, man, this is pretty incredible. As well as they follow some of the other directions the Mexican gives them. They find 2 other maps with similar hieroglyphics or petroglyphs or something written on them, buried in other areas. They continue this till about 1912. They find a coffin which has what looks like is a priest remains in it, with etchings all over the coffin, but they can't really interpret it. They need the Mexican. And then again, they continue to find more bones and artifacts like that. Most all these things went to Dr. Terrell's hardware store and were on display. Many, many people saw them. In fact, a lot of the people in the initial searches gave interviews for many, many years after that they were there when they dug it out. One of the early maps that was found, pieces of sandstone, was found in the roots of an oak tree. Rings a bell. Anyways, it was in the roots of a tree, and the family was there, and the daughters that were there when they were digging it out, and said Arnold actually did dig that out. He went there and said there was something here, and they ended up digging that out. Arnold eventually just kind of disappears. First, the Mexican disappears, like he's frustrated. Him and Arnold head out on something there. And Arnold continues to look. He thinks there's a place where this might have been a Spanish mission. I'm looking for a furnace for where they were mining and all this, but nothing's playing out. It's believed later he was murdered in Kansas, but he disappears. But Bud Jones, Olson, and a couple of these other guys continue on digging around. Now, I do have notes today because of how much stuff they found. Which makes this story so intriguing, because there is a book by a man named Steve Wilson, was put out in 2004. Just look it up under Spider Rock Treasure. Interesting read because of how much documentation, interviews, and how many people were involved over the years, overlapping one another. Before Arnold leaves, he does give copies of the Spider Rock, which nobody knows what happened to it. They believe Terrell might have had it and it got lost in the shuffle over time. But he did have copies of the etchings and everything on the Spider Rock map. So all this is burned up in Terrell's store in 1909. Most of the artifacts and things they had, few things survived. Just so when anybody says, oh, that figures, the things that were found early on, some of those things and things afterwards we'll talk about, are in various museums around the area. So the story is not only well known and the people well known, but they did donate a lot of this stuff. So a lot of it is there, documented that it came out. Unfortunately, they never had an archaeologist or anybody coming in to kind of GPS this stuff and do it proper. Now, they found a couple human skulls at one point. They'd found a large bone pile. And when they figured that out, they found a skull that was facing towards it, and then a skull facing the opposite towards, I think, northwest. And that skull seemed to direct them to another treasure in another place. Now we get to a point where everybody starts bailing, and Bud Jones with a guy named Andy Moss and a young kid named Doc Henderson get involved. And this is getting into the 20s, and they start searching because the original searchers are they're either have left, they've passed away and whatnot. And these individuals start looking into the mission and the stuff the other guys might have missed out on. Now, parallel it with Oak Island, where the one guys are going in there just willy-nilly random, just tearing everything up, digging stuff up, throwing stuff left and right, not really taking a great care. Now, Dr. Terrell's son tried to take as many notes and draw things and kind of keep track of the artifacts, the daggers and the crucifix, things they were finding. But it was just too much. Some of that got burned up in the fire. But these guys were literally, oh, here's another pile of some guy's bones. Let's just throw those over here. Oh, what is this? A dinosaur bone? Toss it, bury it in over there. Let's go look and dig down here now. So these guys start looking. And one of the things that this Doc Henderson, who's the younger guy, who just kind of walked into this, he's looking at some of the interpretations and notes and realizes there's this thing about these mulberry trees. So he goes across by the Brazos River and he finds where the mulberry trees were, and he starts going off of those and find markings and cliffs and things and other things. So this seems to be covering a bigger and much larger area than they expected. Well, of course, with treasure hunters, as soon as this becomes known, someone chops down the mulberry trees. So they disappear from history. But they're looking at this stuff, and next thing you know is they find the first furnace. The first furnace they find, they believe it's a furnace. It has some correlation with the mission in the area. But what they're able to kind of like they think is a big deal is they find not only probably golf ball to like baseball sizes pieces of slag everywhere. They find the ash pit near it is 6 to 10 feet deep underneath it. So they realized there was a lot of burning going here. The furnace was quite of some use. Now, they're working, and these guys start getting older and kind of fading off. But a man named Reed walks into the picture. And Reed's kind of important because Reed comes out of nowhere. Nobody's quite sure who he was or what he was doing. Reed comes walking in, and he basically spends seems to be just spending his time around the Spider Rock, the map, copies, and different things, and he's just taking pencil drawings, and he keeps going through things. What's really, really special is he starts finding these different slabs. He finds a slab in a mesquite tree by a ranch, and it directs him to a certain area, his interpretation, what's on the slab, and they weren't quite sure how he was doing it, much less how the original guys were doing it. But they dig 2 feet in this one area, and they start digging around, and they find a silver statue. They dig up the silver statue. He kind of goes back through everything, goes a different direction, walks like 26 steps, digs up a small box that has a couple crucifixes and some other things in it and a gold nugget. Following him, they would find occasionally a gold nugget or some other artifact. And they were like totally thinking, okay, we got to be on the... Now he continues to find another furnace, another piece of sandstone with something on it. And he sits down and then keeps studying. They find a large sandstone at one point. Reed locates it on another property. Well, they're dealing with a different property owner, so he tells the property owner, hey, we found this. It has a marking of IVXX on it. And he tells him, it's too big for us to move. If you can get us some help tomorrow, we'll remove it. And hey, well, you get your share. It's your property, but, you want to come out. Well, they come the next day and find that he had, as soon as they left, had his workers move the stone. They had found 2 copper pots below. You could see the imprints where the copper pots were. But they're looking at it and all, and Reed says, you know what? That's not what was there. I don't think, because there was probably nothing in the copper pots, because nothing seemed to happen after that. But he said, this is actually one of those things where it's distracting you, but what we need to do is go here. They go a certain distance away. They find a square rock, carved square rock with a square in it. And they go down below that and they dig and they find yet another silver statue, pure silver statue. And on the back of it is the words N-O-R-T-E, Norte, North. They find this. So Reed just keeps finding these things and they think they're honing in closer and closer. I don't know if they were able to take all the notes from these different people and compare all of it. I don't know how much is lost. I'm not familiar with the story. Like I said, there's a number of different people have written on it. Penfield wrote on it. Dobie wrote on it. Oscar Branson wrote on it. Even Erie Schaefer in Dead Men Tell No Tales, Frank Fish. She had found Frank Fish had been interested in the story. So it was a pretty well-known story. Anyways, they're out in this area, and just before Reed finally disappears out of the picture, because he's probably one of the last really important people, they find a 50-foot square area that has squared cut blocks in the corner, all the corners of this square, and in the middle of a charred stump, and they were never able to figure out what that meant. It just seemed to be cryptic messages inside of cryptic messages inside of messages. What Arnold knew, a lot of people say, well, it had to be a hoax, but the problem is the amount of material, the amount of stuff they found, and the stuff that's in the museums that's verified is not like, it's like, no, I mean, there was a copper dagger, or no, there was a dagger that was found that had a copper shaped like a diamond. It said early on they did find some diamonds or some things in some of these holes, and they would find gold nuggets occasionally, like in one of these spots, kind of like, okay, this is your position, now you found this, now this orients you take this 3 gold nuggets and it means this to this. And if you look at the maps, I don't know how they even tried to interpret, because it is like a spider web. Initially it was called the Wheel of Fortune, because it's kind of a wheel thing, but it shortly after that, because of all the different ways it was going, and they were scattered over 3 or 4 counties, digging and finding these things and having them interrelate. It came larger and larger. It is very interesting, the parallel in this happening at the turn of the century in the early 1900s, and the map, and then they find the stone maps, and then they find several others, and there's 3 stone maps, and one's 2-sided, and you start thinking, wow, that's kind of crazy, because I've heard this story before. And I kind of always felt like in the back of my head, there's nothing we can say to prove it, but in the back of my head, there's something that tells me the rock carver Travis Tumlinson, and his grandpa was a treasure hunter, he was very aware of the story. And I kind of feel that might have been part of the impetus for him to come up with the Peralta stones. Maybe that's the TV show. I know there's a couple videos out there. There's not much even on the forums and stuff on this story, just bits and pieces. It's so in-depth. I would say get Stephen Wilson's book. For, like I said, 2004, and I think it's Spider Rock Treasure or something like that. Spider Rock Treasure in Texas. Pick that up. It's available in Kindle too. Go in depth more if you live in the area. And it lists the museums and various places where some of these artifacts can be found. I believe, even though this is more, all these locations are west of Dallas, and Travis was much more southeast of Dallas, more town, I think, bound down towards San Antonio. I believe there's a connection there in this, because the story is very similar, and these different places, and I think you would find, I think you would find that Travis's is kind of like the kindergarten version of this, because this seems very, very complex. What I've done and looked and read on it, I'm just touching the surface for you. But I think it would make a really interesting documentary or film or TV show or series. And the fact that no one's ever touched upon it kind of blows my mind, because if you got stuff in museums and stuff, and people for the last 100 years have been digging into this thing and finding things that seem to be relevant, it seemed like it would be one of the longest, most expensive running hoaxes that no one's profited on. There's a number of people, a man named Olmsted that was out there, and there's a number of different people that continue to search in the area, handing down information. But like I said, Dave Wilson seems to be a good source to go through, did some articles and wrote a nice book on it. So there you go, the Spider Rock treasure, or the Spider Rock mystery in Texas. So I had a couple others I was thinking of doing, but that one just, like I said, every time I kept looking at it and stuff, I kept thinking, man. And there's a lot, if you go out there and look around, there's a lot of photographs of some of the pieces that have survived and stuff. And there is, I don't know if anyone's really interviewed a lot of those guys other than magazine articles, which of course, I have an archive which has all these interviews from these different individuals. And that's what puzzled me, is when I'm seeing there's 10 or 12 different people that were involved actively with the search over a 30, 40-year period. And they were all doing interviews and saying, I don't know how he was figuring it out, but we went out here and we went there. And then, yeah, we found that, but nobody could figure out. But then we would go somewhere else and sometimes figure it out. And, you know, they dug a lot of holes. And kind of like the early Oak Island thing, they dug willy-nilly, sometimes just tearing up the landscape, looking for things. They didn't always come up with stuff, but they did come up with a lot. So there you go. Spider Rock Treasure. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you had a great Father's Day. Hope you're going to have a great rest of the week. It's just hot here, and it will be for anywhere in the foreseeable future. So that being it, enjoy yourselves. Have a great week. See you guys, whoever joins us, on Friday for live. But until then, always remember the most important thing here tonight. You know it. You can say it with me. I'm Wayne Tuttle. You're not. And this was Chasing Legends.